Welcome, everyone, to another episode of GRC Me. I am one of your hosts, Matt Kunkel, CEO and co-founder at LogicGate, and I have the pleasure today to be joined by Chris Patteson, affectionately known as CPAT, or as his friends call him, the Risk Wrangler. Chris, can you give us just a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Super excited to be here on GRC Me, talking with the community about these issues. But my background goes back to GRC in 2007, 2008, I think right about the time we started calling it GRC.
Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about resiliency and agility, but excited to have you on for future episodes. So why don't we start there? Why don't we start with resiliency? So why is resiliency important to any organization's risk management program?
Yeah, this term started popping up, I think more so in the past year, but the first time I heard it was 3 or 4 years ago. I was actually working with some of the Dell folks, and they were talking about the resiliency products. And I said, well, how is that different than business continuity and disaster planning and those types of things, disaster recovery, business continuity? And, they really kind of got into it, and they said, think about what's happening with things like NotPetya. And I actually, unfortunately, went through a NotPetya attack. But the difference is, BCDR was typically if I lost my server farm, due to a fire or some type of outage, or I've actually dealt with floods in the past. How do we reconstitute operations at another location? Is that hot spares, cold spares? It was very IT focused. And what NotPetya, and even more so, has been highlighted by the more recent ransomware attacks, where nation states are often behind them, is that you could be completely dark, right? Your op could be all the way down. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit later in the program. But if that's the case, how resiliency is, can your organization continue to operate, or how quickly can you reconstitute things? And that's a broader scope, right? You're gonna have to understand the business processes, third parties. There's so much to unpack and understand there. But it's different than business continuity and disaster recovery planning, because it really does cross the different sectors of the business.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that was a great kind of overview of resiliency within an organization. Can you give me a quick definition from your perspective of agility and kind of why agility is important to an organization's risk management program, and maybe a little bit about how agility relates to resiliency?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the second half of the equation, as you start to examine the resiliency and how well can my organization survive the impact of a bad event. The agility is how quickly to recover. And again, that goes back to old BCDR, business continuity, disaster recovery days. What are my times to recovery? What are my recovery points? What does that look like? So the agility to reconstitute not just your IT systems, it could be operations. It's that broader picture. And then what state is it going to be in? Is there a minimum operational state to get to, right? The idea of a point of recovery to get to, and then what is the continued work beyond that to kind of get to full operational activity? I know that NotPetya for us at FedEx and Mueller-Maersk, if you think about all the systems being down, customs couldn't clear, right? So we were literally sitting on it. Now we're incurring fines, and customers were incurring fines. So you don't have a customs clearance system, you can't move goods. So was that the first platform we needed to recover? Maybe not. But understanding that and what comes online, because you're gonna be, just like everything you deal with in business, you're going to be resource constrained to a certain extent. You might be able to get some contractors, some folks in to help you, but there's only so much that can be done at any given point. What's that plan look like? How quickly can we get there? Because at that point, your organization is literally bleeding money.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I want to switch gears a little bit. You recently had a very interesting post titled "The First Hour in a Boardroom," and it really highlighted how each department within an organization is really important to a business continuity, an overall business continuity program. Can you share a little bit about kind of an example that you have with our listeners?
Yeah, so I did that because I was talking with a lot of folks, and if you haven't been through something like a NotPetya attack, that was kind of my fictional version of what happened really over a period of a couple of weeks. To us at FedEx, it was also taken quite a bit from. There's a great story that they go into a lot of detail on Wired It's called The Untold Story of NotPetya, and the Mueller-Maersk team was very open about, kind of the things they had to deal with. So I urge everybody to kind of look and go review that. But the first hour in the boardroom shows, right, hey, payroll's down. We can't pay our people. There are, operational issues now that we can't bring these systems up on the plant floor. So it was a fictional story to kind of highlight the importance that, business continuity and disaster recovery is part of that resilience plan, but it is by no means the only thing. So it was a good way to kind of tell a semi-fictional story tied into an example of, hey, this is just a drill, no need to worry. But I can assure you that the discussions in that article actually tied to real things that happened, and the stories that are out there related to NotPetya. You can go follow up on now. And I really do. If you don't want to know how bad it can get, the Untold Story of NotPetya and Wired goes into a lot of great detail on this. Yeah. So as it relates, Matt, to, we're talking about making sure we have these plans. It's the execution and testing of them as well. If you think about it, the board has us running around doing fire drills. We're all on campuses. We pay lots of money, make sure those plans work. We know where everybody assembles. We don't even do that in a lot of cases in our resiliency plans. We need to be testing, running these tabletops, making sure that even if we've designed these very good plans, that they can actually be executed and do the walkthrough. So that's the other way. I was trying to bring some awareness doing first hour in the boardroom is in the end, if you read the end of the article, it's a tabletop, not a real event. But so that's very important that we actually also test these plans. Hell, we do it for fire drills. It's higher odds that you're going to get hit by a ransomware attack or a nation state versus your building burning down. But we need that same rigor kind of in our practices and performance there.
So let's go back to this concept of agility and how did, from your perspective, how does agility really resonate at the board level within organization? We know it's definitely a trend out there, but how does it manifest itself in executive and board level conversations that you've been a part in your days at FedEx?
Yeah, the most aggressive, sorry guys, great. Let me mute that. Good thing it's not live. All right. Yeah. So as it relates to the, working with the board and the trends there, really the biggest trend is in Europe, where they're actually starting to work on legislation and regulation around some of the resiliency and agility challenges that are out there. And some of that ties back to ransomware attacks and especially critical infrastructure. If we start to look at that, they're probably the best at it. Everybody can do a little bit better, but that's where it really is starting. And then it just depends on your boards. I think some boards have seen this. They've seen some of the more kind of damaging attacks to organizations where maybe even some of them have gone, the smaller ones, there are a few that have actually gone bankrupt due to ransomware attacks. But, this is one of those areas, you and I have talked a lot about risk quantification, how key that is. If your board's not understanding, if you walk through and build some good simulations to show this is the total impact, this is what it can look like, this is how much is at stake for us. This is one of those great places that, as leaders within an organization, if you're not getting the attention of your board just by walking through it, kind of, hey, this is what we think is going to happen or what the impact is, really showing them, a good set of risk quantified models using Monte Carlo simulations, loss exceedance curves, so you can see the impacts. That can actually raise the level of conversation, as your CISOs, and especially if the CISO and the COO can get together and really make the rest of the board aware of what the potential total impact is if you lost operations. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. I mean, I think risk quant is going to be a huge driver of this in weeks, months, and years to come for sure. And it's, at the board level, it's all monetary, right? At the end of the day, it's like, what are the dollars and cents here, and how am I mitigating the risk, and what is the impact of that overall risk financially to our organization, right? And if you can put it in those terms, the decisions in the decision tree and path become so much more clear at the board level of, okay, we need to take action here, or maybe we're not going to take action here.
Yeah, and that really, you're exactly right, is that also brings up the ability to run those different scenarios, right? This is without certain controls and protections in place. Here's what it looks like with this mix, mix A, here's what mix B looks like. The same way in information security, we look at defense in depth. How do you take that across the broader organization, and it's recovery in depth, I guess you could call it. But how do I reconstitute the operations? What's that going to take? What are the costs to do that?
Yeah, for sure. I got one last question for you, Chris, and then I'll let you go. With just so many ransomware attacks out there these days, most recently with Log4j, I think resiliency and agility are more important than ever. I think the question is, what can organizations do to be a little more resilient and a little more agile this year within their programs?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations have started to tune up their vulnerability management programs. But if we look at risk management, we know the key to one side of that equation, right? You need to know the assets that are at risk. And I can almost wager, and in my discussions with various CISOs and business leaders across the industry, if you ask them, hey, how good is your CMDB data? And in almost every case, they'll say it needs work, it's broken. So I can almost bet, unless you have an active GRC program where they are working to address those inconsistencies, your CMDB is wrong, right? So right out of the gate, if you're trying to figure out what's impacted and what's happening in my organization, due to the impact of something like Log4j, you're already behind the 8 ball. So setting up that program to get that addressed with your GRC platform is key. And then in a lot of cases, because that CMDB is wrong, you need to audit and hold them accountable. And so the best way to do that, there are tools out there that can do scanning of assets and help you build that inventory in your GRC program, so that the risk managers have the true view of what assets are out there in the organization. They can hold those teams accountable. Hey, you need to update the owner of this system. That person's no longer with the company. What is this IP address that's sitting, under a desk somewhere at somebody's house and looks like it's running heavy transaction loads and key processes? What cloud instances, are out there that we don't have addressed in our CMDB? So building, a good audit program, an independent audit program is very important. And generally the first step in any of these things, because if you don't know your assets, you don't know what you have to, if you don't know your assets, you don't know what you have to recover. And that's really where you start for any good risk management program. And especially vulnerability management programs, you're walking through attempting to patch and correct these things. And then of course your exceptions, as soon as you tell somebody, hey, you've got to patch this, they're liable to come back and say, look, that is so tightly integrated as a part of that process. We want to take our time. So you're playing a little bit of a beat the clock there, but you need to know where those exceptions are, manage through that, and continue to deal with that over time as well. That I saw that happen. In some cases when WannaCry came out, that it was using SMB v1, which was kind of a core Windows component on the older versions of the platform. And there was code out there that was written directly to that. You can't just rip and replace and upgrade your Windows and everything's happy. You had to get some people to go in and say, if we can't directly connect to this service anymore, what's the new one? How do we deal with that? So it really is understanding, how the pieces and parts of your company are tied together and running your organization. So you can go do this type of analysis for resiliency purposes.
Yeah. Great insights, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing a little bit about resiliency and agility, and for educating our GRC listeners and the GRC community abroad. So I really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you on again. So for GRC and Me, my name is Matt Kunkel, and remember to risk with confidence.